Hey guys, um, so Ames here. I haven't made a video in a while. A few updates on me. Since I last made a video, I made Chief. So now I'm in ETNC. I got redistributed to a different boat, and we've been, kind of out and about a lot. And I look a little scruffy right now because I am on stand down leave from deployment. So, and I'll make later videos talking about because I got a lot of comments while I've been out and about. So I feel like everyone should, get their questions answered. And some of those that I can't answer in the comments relatively quickly, that's what I've been trying to do and catch up on. But for those questions that I feel like maybe, you could use a little bit more insight through video, I'll do that instead. But for now, today, I would like to talk about, the financial advantages of becoming a nuke, because there are quite a few. And there's even more advantages if you decide that you want to stay in for a little bit longer. But it's up to you, right? I'm just hopefully helping you on your decision to maybe stay informed, okay? So first, and I'll post these links at the bottom. Sorry, I keep jumping around. But I'll post these links at the bottom so you guys can reference these pages because they're going to get updated, right? Like as the Navy has new policy rollouts and things like that, things kind of, shift and change. But at the time of this video, this is the most current data that I was able to pull from the Navy websites. So first, joining as a nuke, it doesn't matter which, variety of nuke you decide. But if you do, what the Navy recruitment page is saying is it's up to $50,000 of a sign-on bonus, which is pretty good. When I joined 9 years ago, it was 11,000, which honestly I was still pretty excited about because a kid living their life joining was like that was a pretty appreciable amount of money. But 50,000 is even better if you could get that, So, but that's really not the focus for today. So what I wanted to talk to you guys about was there have been some policy updates since some of my previous videos, specifically when it comes to that star reenlistment that I talked about previously. So the star reenlistment, it gets a little convoluted. At least it seems like that, but it's really not that bad, guys. So a star reenlistment is a 6-year reenlistment from the moment that you do it, okay? And the big deal about that is when you first join, right, you sign a 6-year contract. But 2 of those years on the back end are what we call an obiserve, right? It just means that you will either, if you enter that portion of the time frame, it just becomes part of your contract, or you will re-enlist to meet that requirement, okay? Now that's key because you can get paid a good amount of money for those years, right? And I talked about this in my JSI video, specifically what I did, but there are even more opportunities for you guys now. And so I was hoping to kind of talk about that and kind of explain some of those incentives. So now the Navy is offering the Star Reenlistment program to nukes at their 21-month mark. And the reason that's important is because that's about the time when you're going to be graduating the nuclear pipeline. And it's before you ever get to a boat. Now, there are going to be some critics, okay? It's going to happen. There's critics for literally every program out there. But a lot of critics are going to say, okay, well, the Navy's trying to rob you of your 3 months if you were to wait 3 months and cross that 2-year threshold. For those of you guys that are unfamiliar, I'll link the military pay tables as well in the remarks portion so that you guys can kind of see how the pay works. But our pay is scaled based on rank and years in service, right? But your bonus is also calculated based on that. And I'll put the nuclear page linked too so you guys can see that. But it's just a simple equation. So all it is it's the reenlistment bonus multiple, and they assign that per rate. I can link that as well. But that gets changed. I want to say it's like every 6 months, depending on the needs of the Navy. And then it's your additional obligated service, which is the amount of time you add on to the end of your contract, right? And then that multiplied by your base pay, all divided by 12. And an important thing to note, right, is your additional obligated service has got to be in months. All right. So the key thing here, though, is that that 2-year extension I was talking about in your first contract, when you star re-enlist, it blows that out, which is important. So if you think back to that equation, right, that adds an additional 24 months that gets multiplied in there. So you can get a sizable bonus for that same time. Now, the key thing is because it's 6 years from the moment that you do it, you want to do it at like that 2 year and 1 day mark, so that your effective contract time is going to be, 8 years and 1 day. So you minimize the amount of time you give the Navy, but you also maximize the amount that's going to be calculated for your bonus, right? So going back, you have that initial 4 year contract with that 2 year observe. So when you do the star, it blows that 2 years out. You retain the 4, right? And then you add an additional 4 years. Okay, so that's important. Your total contract length is 8 years. So you've effectively only added 2 years, but you're getting paid for the 4. Okay, now if you decide to do it at the 21-month mark, the only difference is, and you won't effectively see anything, but the only difference is that, there's a 3-month extension put on the back. So it equates to the same exact amount of time. It's just to compensate for the, early star reenlistment. And the Navy doesn't authorize that for everybody. It's really an advantage given to nuclear rates, and I think there are a few aviation rates as well that are given this opportunity. So I put it all into some spreadsheets, and I'm not that great at like YouTube or anything, so I'm literally just doing this to help you guys and hopefully keep you informed. Because I've been with my division for a little over a year now as their chief, and I see a lot of missed opportunities is really what it is. And I wish some more people had this information before they got to the boat, because I feel like there's a lot of, kind of bummer information going out right now, because there's a lot of sailors that tell them like, oh, just wait till you get to the boat to reenlist. It's really your choice. But regardless, you're going to be doing the same job on the boat, right? So if you did 2-year pipeline and then showed up to the boat, you still have 4 years. You're going to do your entire sea tour regardless. The only difference is that, with the bonus ahead of time, you're going to get BAH that entire time, which is pretty substantial. You're going to get that E5 pay the entire time, and you'll get the bonus. So I have a guy in my division right now that, like, I showed up and he was, I think he was at his 1.5 year mark on the boat roughly. And so now he's over his 4-year mark in the Navy, and looking back at it now, he wishes he would have reenlisted, but he doesn't want to do a star because he's still an E4, because it adds 6 years from that time frame on. He could reenlist if he wanted to, but he wouldn't get that advancement in rank, which is the real drawback for him. So we've talked to him about a lot of options, and he thinks it's best for him to separate. So that's his decision. But for those of you that are in that spot ahead of time, I want to show you the numbers so that maybe you can make an informed decision ahead of time. So there are some critics that say that, reenlisting before your 2-year mark, because of the equation I was telling you about earlier, it, on the base pay charts, it actually is a little bit less in base pay compared to over 2 years. So I just did all the math for, a Nuke ET under 2 years, and then them at their 2-year threshold. So the multiple as of right now when I'm making this video is a multiple of 5, and then I use the same contract length, so 48 months for the additional obligated service. Now the difference in base pay, so base pay for an E4 under 2 years is $3,027.30. Okay, so if you were over that 2-year mark, it would be $3,182.10. So when you plug it into the calculator, the difference in the bonus, so you would get a bonus of $60,546 if you were under 2 years. Okay, and then if you were over 2 years, you get a bonus of $63,642. Right, so you're talking like a $3,000 difference. Now, what that doesn't take into account, right, is that you're going to be getting BAH for that time frame. And so what I did was I said, okay, let's assume that they're in BAH, category for Charleston, South Carolina, where they did their reenlistment, and say they're there for that remaining 3 months, right? And it's an E5 with no dependents. So that's $1,971 per month, which equates to $7,884. I mean, you can already see the numbers, right? The E5 BAH overcompensates for that 3-month time frame for sure, right? And then, just so you guys understand the bonuses, you get 50% up front, and I just did a tax rate of 22% because that's what I was at. That's a married filing jointly, right? Tax rate. But you know, if you were a single sailor, you would probably be taxed at a different rate. So just take that in mind when you're doing your calculations. So upfront after taxes, you know, I estimated they'd probably get about $23,612, and then yearly thereon, on their reenlistment birthday, they would get about, you know, $4,722 after taxes. Same 22% tax rate. Okay, so pretty big financial advantage if you think about it. Okay, now the difference between the two is because of the E5 BAH, right, is still a net gain of $4,788 if you did it at your 21-month mark. And the key thing here is, like, that's just counting the 3-month difference, right? There's more than that. Because when you show up to your boat, right, there's a lot of admin and things that you're going to have to do, especially if you check in and your boat's, like, say, underway or whatever, and you don't have a lot of connectivity. There's a lot of unpredictable circumstances. It could be very hard to submit your reenlistment initially. So even if you show up to the boat, you're there for a month, and you're like, okay, yeah, I like this. I like my crew. I like my boat. I want to stay. You could end up setting yourself back by a pretty good amount. And you could end up setting yourself back 6 months. And you can see that E5BAH is going to make a huge difference, right? You show up to a boat as an E4, you're not getting that BAH. You're going to be, living in the barracks. And even when you decide to do it afterwards, sometimes there can be complications in getting you that BAH after the fact. And so you're just wasting time and money. And the real thing that you should seriously consider is you're already contracted to do your full sea tour. I've worked with a lot of sailors, right? I think right now, because I just gained a new member in my division, so I have 12 sailors in my division. And all 12 of them, right, like they all have done a different little path, but it can be interesting to see the differences, like those that reenlisted at the 21-month mark, those that reenlisted at the 24-month mark, and to see the financial advantages between them. But they're all contracted to do a 4-year, well, it's really 4.5-year sea tour. The only difference between those that chose not to reenlist and those that reenlisted is about 6 months. So those that are separating from the Navy at their 6-year mark, they're going to do a 4-year sea tour. Those that reenlisted, they're going to do a 4.5-year sea tour. So it's 54 months, right? That 6 months is the only additional sea obligation that you give. Now, the remainder of that time, you're going to go to shore tour, which is, you've already worked hard. You've already, busted your butt. You've done great work. And now you're actually getting rewarded, right? So it really only hurts you not to reenlist. But, I understand, like, if you decide that this is not the job for you, it makes sense. You can certainly separate. But I will tell you, it is easier to separate from a shore tour. Depending on the op tempo of the boat you're on, I think my op tempo right now is about 80%, which means that we're underway 80% of the year. Which, I know that sounds like daunting, but it's really not that bad. I've got a great crew. I've got a great command. And the wives and the family, they take care of each other. And when we're in port, we're in port. We get to spend time with our families. We do work, we do maintenance, but in the long run, you gain a lot from it. And then, you always have chiefs and everybody trying to help you out, and whether that be professional development or personal development, right? That's our goal, is to help you and set you up for success. But you're not going to really gain much from that 6-month difference. And as you can see from the numbers, right, like you end up losing quite a substantial amount of money. As a $60,000 difference in bonuses, not counting the almost $2,000 a month in BAH. That's Charleston BAH. I'm stationed in Groton, so Groton, Connecticut, that is. So that the BAH is a little bit different up here. But what I've noticed is that for the higher ranks, it tends to be a little bit more. Another advantage to start reenlisting, if you watch my JSI video and some of the other videos that I've posted, I kind of hit all of the perfect windows for everything, right? So I made E5 before I was even eligible to star. But aside from that, if you're, don't hit the perfect opportunities, it can be very difficult to make E5. They don't, like this last cycle, they only advanced 2 out of the entire Navy for Nuke ETs. So your odds are very, very low. Now that puts you in the E5 category. And then I will tell you that like most people, their first time up are making E6 as a Nuke ET, as well as the mechanics. The nuclear mechanics this last cycle, every single one of them made first class up. And that's pretty impressive, right? So the Navy has got a lot of opportunities for rank. And then if you decide, and I'll talk about career pathways to success and things in another video, but making chief, I can talk to you through the steps and the success patterns in order to get to that point if you guys decide that as well. But so that's what I've got about Star Re-Enlistment, just the first one. I can talk about bonuses and things like that later if you guys would like, about the Zone Bravo and the Zone ESRP Zone 1, if you choose to go that route. But I got a lot of awesome comments. I got comments from prior nukes, active nukes, and then also just for people who had questions. And so please keep feeding your questions. And now I'm back on land, so I can go through and actually look at you guys' content and hopefully help you with whatever questions you may have. And trust me, like if you have a question you may think it's kind of goofy, I guarantee you tons of other people have the same questions. So please ask. There's things that I'm gonna overlook or forget because I've been doing the job, right? So hopefully you use this as an opportunity to kind of ping me with questions, and then I can answer whatever it is you guys have questions about, and maybe help you stay more informed and make the best decision for you. But thank you for watching my video, and if you like the content, please hit the like button and maybe recommend this to other nukes. And if they have questions too, feel free to ping their stuff on my page as well. So I'll help anybody. That's kind of my job as the chief anyway. But hopefully I can reach out to you guys ahead of time and really set you up for success before you ever even get to a boat. But thank you for your time.